Ahoy there to all my followers of darkness, shadow scavengers, and villain aficionados. Welcome, bienvenue. As always, here I am, your good old Lord of Shadows, and this is none other than one of my good old-fashioned movie reviews time. Guys, I don't know about you, but for me personally, I'm ready. Sorry, I had to do that. Yep, the time has come finally for me to review the SpongeBob movie, Search for SquarePants. Yep, I finally got a chance to see it yesterday, so here I am, guys, giving my overall general thoughts about the movie itself. Oh, man. I mean, first and foremost, when it comes to the overall premise, well, let me put it this way. SpongeBob is on a quest to prove to Mr. Krabs that he's brave enough to be the big guy. But during his quest, he meets this dangerous, diabolical being called the Flying Dutchman. And together, they go on a seafaring adventure into the deepest parts of the ocean called the underworld. And that's kind of like basically overall the premise. Yeah, I mean, first and foremost, this movie has a very interesting history. I mean, like, because I actually learned some news. Actually, I think it was like few days before I've seen the movie in the theater. Basically, for what I've learned and from some concept arts I've seen, it appears that this movie was supposed to actually go direct to streaming, but it was supposed to be a spin-off movie where the main character is Mr. Krabs. And from the concept arts I've seen, it was supposed to be like this Mr. Krabs type of journey, and throughout that journey, he's finding the Flying Dutchman, And then basically after that, they were like, it's a good idea. But guess what? Instead of making it, go directly to streaming, we're gonna make it a theatrical release. But of course, instead of making Mr. Krabs the main character, we're gonna bring in SpongeBob as, of course, traditional main lead character as he always was. And that's basically how the SpongeBob movie Search for SquarePants was born. From all the information at least I gathered. But I have to tell you, man, my overall reaction, I mean, I didn't had so much fun with the SpongeBob movie ever since I saw the first one. That was written and directed by Steven Hillenburg. I mean, everything about this movie I really, really enjoyed. I had a super fun time with this one. From like the characters, the humor, the animation, the slapstick comedy, the overall story, everything about this movie for me, it really felt like interesting. Absolutely. I mean, like the overall story itself, it's in some capacity. Some people might say, it's kind of a little bit generic, traditional and everything. But also, it's a type of story that also kind of connects with us, like on a personal level. Basically, from being a child, when we grow up and everything, and try to prove ourselves, that we are grown enough, to basically do something that we could never do. As children and everything, So in a personal way, I connected with SpongeBob's story, in this movie because I know what it feels like, when you grow a little bit and you think of yourself like, yeah, I'm ready to do like the most dangerous and impossible challenges I couldn't have done when I was a kid, So again, I felt with SpongeBob, on this journey, And of course, when you have SpongeBob, of course, you're gonna have, Patrick Star, enjoying, basically joining in SpongeBob's quest to be the big guy, or should I say, the swashbuckler, basically, as they mentioned it a couple of times throughout the entire movie. Yeah, I mean, like, so yeah, story-wise, I really liked it. I mean, he had, he had all sorts of stuff. I mean, basically, when you have a SpongeBob movie, of course, the main ingredient will always be comedy. And throughout the entire story, I had so much fun. Almost like from jokes that made me giggle, there were with jokes that made me laugh, and there was a lot of times that I was laughing like a maniac. Yeah, I mean, this movie for me personally, it really felt like I was like back in those days when I was a child. When I was watching like the early days of SpongeBob, like the first like 3-4 seasons and everything. Like everything about this movie. It kind of reminded me of that. It brought me back to my childhood, basically, in general. I mean, yeah. I mean, also, the guy, if I remember, the guy who directed this movie, I think like he was like, I mean, you can guys in the comment section can correct me if I'm wrong, but it kind of, if I remember correctly, the guy who directed this, I think he was like one of the main writers of SpongeBob, like season 1 to 3. I think, I mean, again, I could be wrong and everything, So And basically, so if that is, if that information I gather is actually true, when you see this movie, you can actually see why. You can actually see why, because I tell you, from the jokes, the tone, some of the like twists and turns, and some silly and crazy moments, and we even got like something that actually I think that we never had like in a SpongeBob movie. We even had the like few moments later, like even that moment was added in this movie and was absolutely phenomenal. Like yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, and again, I mean, and going to the characters, I mean, like all the characters, like from like SpongeBob all the way to Gary. That's another thing that actually I was kind of shocked to see in this movie, that Gary also finally played a major role in a SpongeBob movie, because usually he's always a background character, and because usually you are like you have SpongeBob and like alongside other main characters. So I was really happy that he was on board in this movie as well. And other things also I have to mention, now I know that some people have been like how can I put this, I know some people might actually kind of complain that like certain characters like Sandy, Plankton, Mrs. Puff, who also made like cameo appearances throughout the this movie. They kind of like took like a background role, in this movie, because basically, if you look at the story, the main characters are, you have SpongeBob, Patrick, the Flying Dutchman, Mr. Krabs, Squidward, and of course Gary. Though they're like kind of like the main characters and everything, but of course at the front being SpongeBob and Patrick as always. But honestly, for me, it really felt like this was like SpongeBob and Mr. Krabs movie. Honestly, and then I started to remember like those like first ideas they had for this movie when they wanted to make it like a on streaming and everything. You could kind of see those elements in this movie as well. I mean, look. First of all, like one of the things I do have to mention is that like ever since I became a big fan, like a huge fan of SpongeBob as a franchise in general, especially when the movies came out and everything, I always had like two wishes. I always had two wishes. One, to since my number one favorite character out of all of them was always Mr. Krabs, I always wanted Mr. Krabs to either be the main character of like basically his own movie, if they ever decide to do a spin-off, which of course with the recent movies they did, of course they already started, and it still could be a possibility they could do a Mr. Krabs spin-off movie. But anyway, to make Mr. Krabs like either the main character or at least one of the main characters. And when I say one of the main characters, I don't mean like in the previous movies where you have SpongeBob and Patrick, and then like the others join them, as basically as a team. No, I mean like just like SpongeBob and Patrick are in almost every movie together. That's how I wanted Mr. Krabs as well. Like this time that he's taking the mantle of like the main role. And when you see so that first wish was granted, because this movie felt like not just simply a SpongeBob movie, but it also felt like a Mr. Krabs movie, because both these characters throughout the entire movie, they're trying to prove themselves. Basically like SpongeBob is trying to prove himself to be a big guy, but Mr. Krabs, like he's trying to prove, basically to SpongeBob and everybody that he is who he's claiming to be. Now, again, I'm trying to be as spoiler-free as possible, but also at the same time, confronting his past. Let's just put it that, let's just put it that way. That so that's one of the reasons why I would say that this is literally SpongeBob and Mr. Krabs movie. But also at the same time, which for me is one of the greatest praises for this movie, is that this movie it basically also centered around the bond between SpongeBob and Mr. Krabs. Now, their bond, or at least like the element that Mr. Krabs cares for SpongeBob, has been seen a couple of times, throughout the TV series. There were some moments in movies and everything, but mostly, Mr. Krabs cared for him, because because of money, and sometimes, it was because either he saved his life or it was convenient, But this movie actually proved how much Mr. Krabs cares for SpongeBob, and there are so many cute moments where you see that, on the big screen, and it was so touching. It was so touching. Like, this movie made me love Mr. Krabs' character even more, but also at the same time their overall relationship, their bond, with each other. It was so adorable, and one of the biggest praises that I had when I watched this movie. Now, the second wish I had: make the Flying Dutchman a main character, or even better, a main villain. Now, when you have SpongeBob, of course, throughout the movies, in this case, movies, we had a few, like, original characters, like, Wanda Sykes' character in Sandy Cheeks movie. We had Burger Beard from, like, Sponge Out of Water. There were some, like, original characters, and outside of that, you always had, Plankton or Karen being kind of like, the main villains, and everything. But I always thought the world of SpongeBob was so big, and one of the characters that kind of basically got him into my mind was the Flying Dutchman, who is also one of my top 3 favorite characters, or like in the entire SpongeBob franchise. And I wanted to see more of the Flying Dutchman, and with this movie, another one of my wishes was granted. I was so happy to see the Flying Dutchman take the mantle of the main villain, and he was great. But I will get to the Flying Dutchman a little bit later. But absolutely, he was freakishly great. One of the things also I have to mention, besides the characters, I just want to go quickly a little bit to the animation. The animation, like, I know that some people are still not used to, like, seeing SpongeBob, like, in 3D, at least when it comes to, like, movies or even like Camp Coral. But honestly, the 3D animation in this movie was superb. Was actually superb, with the same style that SpongeBob, the way how the 3D combines with the same style that SpongeBob does have, throughout the entire TV series, was actually pretty good. I mean, I was literally shocked how good the 3D animation was in this movie. Way better, for example, than the Sandy Cheeks movie or Plankton the movie. Although Plankton the movie, like Sandy Cheeks, they were supposed to be like, straight to streaming, movies. Of course, the quality would drop, when it comes to animation wise. But so in that case, the animation was way more better than, for example, was the Sponge Out of Water movie, or I mean, I can't say Sponge on the Run, because Sponge on the Run has a very peculiar type of animation that kind of goes with 3D. So that's why I'm saying Sponge Out of Water. The animation in The Search for SquarePants way better than Sponge Out of Water. Way better. Like, so many details. If it's like, the world, if it's like, Bikini Bottom, or like the underworld, or Krusty Krab, or like some like facial structures or movements, or certain like, action sequences, if it's like, under the sea, or in the human world, aka the surface. I was really surprised how good the animation was in this movie. Like, it was really, really well done. And it still surprised me this movie actually cost only $64 million, like, as a budget. It really surprised me, because throughout that kind of animation, it kind of makes you think like it could have been a little bit more. So with $64 million, what they achieved, well done when it comes to animation wise. Now, other things I also have to mention when it comes to the, characters is, they also love that. Also, they give some spotlight with Squidward as well. Even though, like I said, at first he starts, with Patrick and SpongeBob and Patrick, and then later on became SpongeBob and Mr. Krabs, and everything. But other characters, like I said, Patrick and Squidward in this case, also had some like moments to shine in this movie, which I thought it was a really nice touch. Especially one of my favorite Squidward moments was a certain moment in the underworld. I cannot go into details what it is, but there was a certain moment that really made me laugh, and it was like, yep, typical Squidward, absolute typical Squidward. Now, the other things that you actually rarely see in a SpongeBob movie in this case is the because they're dealing with with the whole thing with ghost pirates and the underworld and everything. Like, there were also a lot of moments in the underworld where actually you kind of felt a little bit scared, especially in scenes when it involves Mr. Krabs and Squidward. There were some actually fun, scary elements, in this movie as well, which kind of was surprised to see. I mean, when it comes to being scary, SpongeBob was never like a stranger when it comes to having some scary elements, into the mix and everything. Like it's no stranger, but I was still surprised to see them on this kind of scale when you're dealing, with the underworld, basically. So for me personally, none of the characters for me were left out. Like it really, I really liked what I've seen. Also, one of the characters I will welcome with open arms to the SpongeBob family is Barb, the assistant of the Flying Dutchman, voiced by Regina Hall. She was like really funny as Barb. I really like her character, especially her moment with Patrick. I real in those parts she was like she was like incredibly funny and interesting. So I would say for her, I welcome her with open arms in the SpongeBob family. Like she was really an interesting character, and I really hope that we're gonna see more of her in the future. That's one of the things I also wanted to say. Now, the other things also, the voice cast. Of course, Tom Kenny is SpongeBob. I mean, come on, like he will always be great. He will always be great. If it's like funny moments, serious moments, emotional moments, every single time, like Tom Kenny will always be the great. Bill Farbuckle is Patrick. Same thing. Also, I will say in this movie, actually, I mean, some people might correct me if I'm. I mean, you guys correct me if I'm wrong, but like in this movie, it kind of felt like Patrick was less dumb and a little bit more smarter. I mean, because there are some certain moments where you can actually kind of feel that, with Patrick's character. Of course, for anyone who has seen the movie, I guess you know what I'm talking about. But it kind of felt like with Patrick that he became a little bit smarter in this movie, unlike in the other movies. Again, I mean, of course, he will still be an incredibly dumb sea star and everything, but in this movie, it felt like they give him a little bit more brain this time, and I welcome that. Bill Farbuckle, he was great. He was really, really great as as Patrick Star, as he always was, alongside, of course, alongside the voice of Squidward, like even he was incredible, as he always was. And I mean, Squidward will always be Squidward, and his voice performance was also great. But there are two specific voice performances that I really have to praise in this movie, and one of them is Clancy Brown as Mr. Krabs. Now, Clancy Brown as Mr. Krabs, he will always be, great. Like, no matter like if it's like the TV show or video games or like the movies, he was always great. But in this one, he actually surprised me a little bit. Like he actually, with his voice performance, he actually gave more. He gave, like I said, mentioned a few minutes ago, he gave Mr. Krabs more depth. Especially those like emotional moments or like moments with SpongeBob. So for me, the standout for me, number one, was Mr. Krabs. Or should I say Clancy Brown as Mr. Krabs. Like, I have to tell you, like, his voice performance in this movie was really, really well done. Absolutely. And then let's go to the elephant of the room, okay? Oh no, actually, let me rephrase that. Let's talk about the elephant in the room, okay? The one, the only, the Flying Dutchman. For me, the scene stealer of the entire movie. Oh man, and of course, surprisingly, voiced by and performed by Mark Hamill himself. Oh man, I was like, wait, look, at first I was surprised they're gonna cast him as the Flying Dutchman, because I mean, everyone knows the Flying Dutchman. They know, that the main voice of him was always, Brian Doyle Murray, Bill Murray's brother. So I was like, okay, so they replaced him with Mark Hamill. Like, how come? I mean, he's still active as the Flying Dutchman. I mean, like, look at the SpongeBob video game, Clash of the Titans. No, actually, Tides of the Titans, I think it was called, or something like that. But anyway, in the newly released SpongeBob video game, Brian Doyle Murray still voiced the Flying Dutchman and everything. So I was kind of curious to why they're replacing Mark Hamill. Because I mean, so like almost every single SpongeBob fan, I was a little bit surprised. But I guess because having like sometimes A-list actors into a movie because the marketing and everything, like I kind of guess that was kind of like the idea and reason why maybe Brian Doyle Murray wasn't that much of a bigger name, I mean, I don't know. I'm just guessing, but overall, Mark Hamill, he nailed it out of the park. He was fantastic. Now, okay, I will admit, because we all grew up seeing him as the Joker, there are moments that kind of through his voice, he kind of brings you back, to the ways of the Joker. But then also at the same time, there are also a lot of moments where you can actually see that he's trying to mimic Brian Dole's Murray's version of the Flying Dutchman, which I always thought was kind of cute. Like at the same time bringing something new by himself, but at the same time honoring Brian Dole's Murray's legacy as the Flying Dutchman. I felt like it was absolutely, I thought it was absolutely amazing, but from Mark Hamill's side, And again, like he was absolutely great. Like he was funny. He was he was funny. He was diabolical. He was scary. Like and sometimes intimidating. But oh man. It's not a big spoiler, okay? It's not a big spoiler because like you guys all have seen that in the trailer. But in some point, and I'm not gonna say how, in some point, the Flying Dutchman turned back into a human form. And oh man, see Mark Hamill in the Flying Dutchman costume. And that nose. Oh man, that nose. Like I was laughing like a maniac, okay, when I saw him as a human. Oh man, but nevertheless, he didn't take me out of the movie. Like he was still fantastic in this movie, absolutely fantastic. And I had to say that, like when it comes to voiceover, like this movie, when it comes to Mark Hamill's career as a voice actor, this has now become one of my top 5 favorite Mark Hamill roles that he did as the Flying Dutchman. Oh man, like he was absolutely amazing, and for me, the scene stealer of all the characters in this entire movie. So but again, so with him, the standouts are Mr. Krabs and the Flying Dutchman for me throughout this entire movie. Also, at the same time, like I just want to say, like, how much this movie remind me of the old days of SpongeBob. Like the first few seasons, like because there are some moments that basically, I feel like I never saw that actually appearing in a SpongeBob movie. But there were even some moments with those very typical like painting style scenes that they use like in the animated series. Mostly actually the movie was involving around Patrick's butt. But I was really happy to see that as well, alongside the later moments. Like that was absolutely amazing. Also, like there are actually even some action sequences, in this movie as well, and also in a SpongeBob style, really well made. So yeah, I mean, I can go on and on about this movie, but like but for me, one of the biggest praises I always had was basically this movie had this nostalgic vibe of the early days of SpongeBob, that in which also made me enjoy this movie even more. Now, one of the things before I lock down my review, one of the things I have to mention is, of course, Ice Spice. Now, at first, I seen a lot of people who didn't like the idea that Ice Spice actually she's in this movie, or should I say, she made a song for this movie. And honestly, before this movie, I never heard of her. Again, I'm sorry, I never heard of her, so I had to do a little bit of research on YouTube. I listened to some of her music. So, and then I was like, that doesn't actually go with SpongeBob and everything, And of course, but then after hearing, her music in the trailer and everything, that big guy, SpongeBob, big guy, pants okay, like it became a very catchy song. I have to tell you, it's a very catchy song, and that song was used not simply, of course, at the end credits, but also there was a certain scene at the beginning that used that song, and for that particular scene and the reason why, behind it, it actually worked. I have to say, it actually worked. Also, I'm really happy they gave like a nice. I'm also glad that they gave her like a cameo like voice role into this movie as well. I felt like that was also kind of like a nice little addition, but also cute at the same time. Yeah. So overall. And also besides the Ice Spice music, again, like I said, no complaints, and I thought that her song was actually catchy. But besides that, like the soundtrack itself, again, very SpongeBob-like, but also at the same time, so swashbuckling, like because like one of the things I always love about SpongeBob is basically the pirate themes. And this movie was filled with it, which also gave me another big plus to enjoy this movie. Now, when it comes to like the negatives, I actually don't have them, honestly. I mean, there are some nitpicky ones, but nothing actually that can actually make me go in a deeper discussion to kind of criticize this movie, because like I said, I really had a super fun time with this movie. I really did. Like everything about it, from like the characters, the voice performances, the animation, the soundtrack, the story. Again, the story maybe the story could have been a little bit more richer, maybe a little more interesting, because at the end, it was like very traditionally generic, let's put it that way. And I'm saying this in a good way, not like in a bad way. But because of the connections this story had, especially SpongeBob's journey with like real life and everything, it made me enjoy the story, a little bit more, because like, because through that dream, through that crusade, let's put it that way, the SpongeBob had in this movie, I personally connected with him, because I felt the same way as when I was a kid, and when I was like, where basically when I started to grow up a little bit more and everything, like, so yeah, I think that's kind of, I guess like that's kind of like my nitpicky thing I have, but everything else, I had a blast with it. Absolutely. Yeah. So with that being said, I'm giving this movie. I know there's gonna be a lot of people gonna say, "Ooh, are you insane? Are you drunk? Oh my God, you're such a sucker," because like for a lot of people, I'm not gonna say who, but a lot of people, they after SpongeBob season 3 or 4 or 5, whatever, for them like SpongeBob is dead. Well, for me, he's still alive and ticking. Because I still watch the show even today. And yes, I'm a guy who's 30 years old, by the way, and I still watch and enjoy SpongeBob. Yep, just to let you know. So with that being said, I'm gonna give this movie a 9, a 9 out of 10. And I know there's gonna be a lot of people gonna say, "Whoa, oh my God, are you insane?" Hey, I told you, I enjoyed the heck out of this movie from the beginning to the very end. And it's not just simply me being a huge SpongeBob fan, but everything about it was a blast for me. Like I said, from the story, the characters, the soundtrack, the villains, like the animations, the way how they imagined the surface world and everything. Also, the surface world, by the way, very SpongeBob TV show like way how they did it. Because like if you try to compare it to SpongeBob out of water, or even like SpongeBob the movie, those are like generic, traditional way of like when CGI or cartoon characters go to the surface world in the world of humans. For example, just like Who Framed Roger Rabbit in this case, But this interpretation of the surface world and the overall effects around and everything, it really felt like they were taken off the actual SpongeBob TV show, more precisely in the early days. So that's one thing I also have to mention. So yeah, with that being said, 9 out of 10 is this movie for me. Yep, and also I can officially say, this movie now has become my second favorite SpongeBob movie of all time. Yep. And of course, above it is the first SpongeBob movie, of course, naturally. And with that being said, here I'm done, guys. Rate the video, comment, like, subscribe, give me your personal thoughts and ideas. If you have seen the new SpongeBob movie already, what did you thought about the story, the characters, the Flying Dutchman as the villain, the voice cast, everything about this movie in general? Just simply drop it in the comment section down below. Stay tuned for more as always. See you guys later. Lord of Shadows signing off, or, as I always like to say, later, fuckers.